the most effective drug-seizing teams in the entire country. I said I wish I told them earlier, take them and put them in every major city in the country.
Before dawn, Minneapolis doesn't sound like a city. It breathes slowly, wrapped in ice, the kind of cold that hardens sidewalks and keeps secrets buried. At 4:22 a.m., Cedar Riverside was frozen in that silence. Cars sat entombed in frost. Streetlights glowed like distant stars. To the thousands of residents who lived there, the building at the end of the block represented stability and leadership. It was supposed to be a place where decisions were made in public view, where trust lived. But trust was about to be broken. From the far end of the street, dark shapes emerged through the snow. A long line of unmarked federal vehicles rolled forward without sirens or flashing lights. Doors opened quietly. 58 agents stepped into the cold, boots crunching softly on ice. Faces were set, badges were concealed. This wasn't a show of force meant for cameras. It was precision.
First, consider that 80,000 Somali Americans call Minnesota home. Soon, upwards of 100 ICE agents could be targeting them who living here, many understandably nervous.
The kind used when investigators already know what they're going to find. They formed a tight stack at the main entrance. One agent raised a breaching hammer. The first strike cracked the oak door. The second loosened the frame. On the third, the wood splintered inward. The silence shattered. Federal agents, move! They flooded the building, clearing rooms with practiced speed. Flashlights cut through darkness. Drawers were opened. Walls were tested. Within minutes, it was clear this wasn't a routine search. This wasn't about paperwork mistakes or political favors. Hidden behind a false ventilation panel near the main desk, agents pulled out 23 sealed bricks of cocaine, wrapped and stamped with cartel markings. This wasn't personal use. This was supply. A steel safe bolted into the floor was next. Drills screamed. The door gave way. Inside sat $4.7 million in cash, stacked with obsessive order, banded by denomination and serial sequence. More money than the local bank branch carried in its vault. But the discovery that stopped agents cold was sitting in plain sight on the desk. A satellite phone still powered on, blinking with an unread message. The phone linked Minneapolis to financial hubs overseas. Encrypted instructions, transfer confirmations, routing details. This wasn't corruption by accident. This was infrastructure. A laundering pipeline operating from the office of a man elected to serve the public. The betrayal cut deep. The senator who worked in this office had built his reputation as a bridge between communities, a voice for education and safety. For years, he had spoken about unity. Behind closed doors, he was building something else entirely.
FBI agents raided a Bloomington business on Thursday after prosecutors say it billed Medicaid.
What started as political ambition had quietly transformed into organized crime. Over 6 years, investigators would later trace dozens of shell companies, tens of millions in cash, and hundreds of millions in international transfers moving through programs tied to his name. Surveillance footage told the rest of the story. Short meetings in basements and storage units, quiet handshakes, no speeches, no crowds, just approvals. Movement of narcotics, movement of money. The senator used multiple phones, rotated constantly, each one linking him to different intermediaries, business owners, logistics coordinators, and compromised officials who stopped asking questions.
Twin Cities leaders are preparing for a federal immigration crackdown as soon as this week. CBS News is reporting ICE will launch an operation targeting Somalis with deportation orders who live in Minnesota.
And by the time federal analysts assembled the full picture, the case had outgrown any single building. Maps filled the command center walls, red markers clustered across the city and spilled outward into surrounding areas, every line pointed toward one location, a nondescript community building on the outskirts of Minneapolis. From the outside, it looked empty. Inside, intelligence suggested it was alive every night. The decision came fast. This could not be handled in pieces. Arresting one person would collapse the rest inward, evidence would disappear, people would vanish. The response had to be total. The operation was named Northern Sweep.
Democratic leaders in Minnesota slamming the Trump administration over reports of planned immigration enforcement targeting Somalians in the Twin Cities. It comes after President Trump criticized the group during a cabinet.
Just before dawn, across frozen fields and industrial roads, helicopters flew low. Drones hovered, their lights slicing through darkness. Armored vehicles moved toward gates and fences at 29 locations simultaneously. There would be no warning, no chance to scatter. At 4:30 a.m., the first barricade fell. Metal screamed, sparks flew, agents surged forward. Doors were blown open, flash grenades turned night into white fire. Inside the main complex, the layout felt intentional. Reinforced corridors, sealed rooms, controlled access points. This wasn't a warehouse, it was a fortress. Gunfire erupted briefly as armed guards tried to hold positions behind stacked crates. It ended quickly. Suspects were forced to the floor, zip-tied, weapons kicked away. Then agents reached the locked interior rooms. Behind steel doors secured with layered locks, they found a fully operational drug manufacturing line.
One day after President Trump escalated tensions with America's Somali community.
They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country.
Stainless tanks, conveyor belts, chemical containers labeled in code, ventilation systems designed to mask fumes. Nearby sat crates of ammunition and body armor. This wasn't just trafficking, it was production, protected with military discipline. In one room, investigators uncovered a command center. Screens glowed with live feeds, encrypted radios sat charging. On the wall hung a photograph that said more than any confession ever could. A uniformed police sergeant smiling beside known criminal figures. Proof that protection had been bought, not feared. When the arrests were complete, the real work began. Evidence rooms filled quickly. Files labeled with harmless titles, community outreach, youth development, were opened one by one. Inside were receipts and approvals for massive sums of money. Payments authorized in minutes, permits signed at impossible speeds, clinics funded that never operated, construction approved that never happened. As analysts cross-checked records, patterns emerged. A councilman approving multiple permits in under 15 minutes. A police captain paid as a security consultant on the same day a suspicious shipment crossed his district. The system hadn't failed. It had been used. An elderly clerk who had spent decades processing paperwork broke down in tears when she saw the documents. They said it was for children, she whispered. This wasn't bribery in dark alleys, it was bribery through forms, stamps, and official seals. Another room held maps, satellite images marked with lines connecting warehouses, docks, basements, and transport routes.
According to press reports, the operation could begin within days. The move comes as President Trump has disparaged Somalis with increasingly inflammatory rhetoric.
It wasn't a hiding place. It was a network. Handwritten notebooks listed monthly payments to officers, tens of thousands every month for years. Beside business names were numbers with no explanation, no services rendered, just money moving. Emails filled in the gaps. Approved the transfer. No inspection. Warehouse ready. By afternoon, prosecutors gathered with investigators. The lead attorney spoke quietly but clearly. This isn't one criminal, she said. It's a structure, and it has lived inside public life for a long time. When the sun rose the next day, Minneapolis looked unchanged from a distance, but on the ground things felt different. Yellow tape marked doors that once welcomed volunteers, headlines were impossible to ignore, dozens of locations raided, hundreds arrested, millions seized. People stood longer on their porches, conversations were softer, trust had been shaken in a way that statistics couldn't explain. A retired teacher stared at her newspaper and whispered that she used to attend meetings in one of those buildings. She wasn't angry, she was hurt. In diners and coffee shops, the same questions surfaced again and again. If leaders can do this, who do we trust? A week later, the courthouse steps filled, not with shouting crowds, but with quiet signs asking for answers. Parents wondered about vans they had seen months earlier. Small businesses closed temporarily after owners were arrested. The city slowed not from fear, but from realization. The first victim had been trust. Rebuilding it would take time, and a reporter asked a federal agent whether the danger was gone. The agent shook his head gently. No, he said. Danger never disappears, but neither does courage. The raids were over. The consequences were not. Minneapolis was still standing, but now it was awake. If this story changed how you see power, trust, in the systems around you, don't let it end here. Share this video so more people understand how deeply corruption can hide in plain sight. Subscribe to the channel for the next investigation already underway, because these networks don't disappear. They adapt. Stay informed, stay alert, and remember, accountability only exists when people are watching.